Do you remember coming across this chart of all the elements in middle school and going, wow, they gotta make this into an RPG? But also, where did it state this? And then you'd look to the side and see an identical chart someone else made with a couple elements swapped around, and then you'd realize all of it was speculation. It's been 50 years and Naruto's long done. Boruto's moved far past the elements. So what if it's worth revisiting the chart? What if there was enough information hidden across Naruto that would complete the list and placements of every Kekkei Genkai? Can we find all 10 Chakra Nature Kekkei Genkai elements, and only the real ones? I'm asking because Naruto doesn't say its mechanics out loud, and across all the extended media and filler, there are way more than 10. The normal 5 elements are based on 2 things. There's the elemental system tied to Taoism that represents the 5 stages of the life cycle of anything, symbolically represented by fitting materials: wood, metal, fire, earth, and water. And the more Greek-used elemental system that says the numerous complicated materials, objects, and components of the universe can be broken down into a smaller number of building blocks: fire, earth, water, and air. Naruto fuses a bunch of concepts from different cultures, like how it combines its version of chi with chakra. And because chi is supposed to be this energy that allows for more complex activity, like life forms, to exist in this Taoist world that's built from the traffic of these simpler rock, paper, scissors cycles tending to form infinite loops that then interact with and start layering over each other, it only makes sense if someone could use their chi to echo a building block they resonate with. And so we've got chakra being able to manifest the 5 elements, where each person has an affinity for each element depending on how they embody the concept it symbolizes. Water is flexibility and being able to balance and change. Earth is stability and the strength that comes from that. Wind is motion and the freedom that comes from being able to guide yourself. Lightning is focus and the intense concentration or connectivity that comes from jumping between extremes. And fire is destruction, and how that spreads like an infection when negativity has the tendency to produce cycles of itself. You can see these 5 traits in the characters who have affinities for these elements. Naruto is a wind style user, and he's a person who analyzes shinobi values for himself on his own terms, which lets him realize the flaws with them and allows him to become a guiding force for others. And similarly, we've got the free spirit Asuma and Temari, the one shinobi from the Sand Trio, who was independent enough to move to the Leaf. They define things on their own terms. Kakashi and Sasuke, who can be very efficient and dedicated, but sort of blinded by their tunnel vision, both get lightning style. And Sasuke also gets fire style, because he comes from a clan whose identity originated from a founder relying on weaponizing negative cycles, burdening his descendants with grudges that would always put a strain on their relationship with the rest of society, and tempting them with the power that comes from exploiting destruction as an easy available solution. Your potential and talents are influenced by the life you're able to be born into, which is why people can't really control what affinities they have, and also why some of them, like the Uchiha's fire style, may be effectively hereditary. So when a person has a lineage that gives them a Kekkei Genkai element that comes from affinities for 2 base elements, they embody both of those. Haku has both wind and water style, and he has both wind style's initiative, adopting values on his own terms and taking independent actions within the roles he's committed to, and water style's balancing flexibility, being a manager/caretaker/assistant for Zabuza, taking on those various roles for him. And Yamato has both water and earth style. He is always stressed because he maintains stuff, like Naruto's transformations, but he has the stability to stick to single roles. So he's very reliable, but often also a bit of a punching bag, kind of like Hashirama. Together, stability and flexibility combine to make the concept of growth. So just like how liquid water represents flexibility, and solid earth represents stability, growth is represented by wood and organic life, material that can grow, adding to itself because it makes new shapes like water style, but doesn't get rid of what was already there, like earth style. And because in the traditional elements, wood resonates with yang, it fits that wood release resonates with and easily conducts yang-based jutsu, like healing techniques. The elemental chakra natures are tied to physical materials, putting a modern and material spin on the Taoist concepts, because Naruto fuses cultural ideas, and characters in the series try to understand the power system like a science in a technologically modern setting. So the theme of the element system is materials, with a bit of a scientific flavoring. They're not the actual periodic table, but every material or odd type of chakra can be broken down into basic elements, like the blue flames of the two tails being pretty much identical to normal fire, just complicated a bit with a color change and some specific mystical properties. But if Naruto's elements are meant to be the building blocks of every physical material, then how come there are some materials with niche properties that aren't found within any of them? Flames can add heat, but that's a very different process from taking heat away. What about stretchy materials like rubber, or absorbents that pull in other substances? What about concepts that only apply to some materials, like magnetism, or explosives, or acids? If Naruto's world still boils down to abstract cycles, then maybe, even though the elements manifest as materials, they fundamentally come from the abstract traits they embody. Which means, if you pair those traits before you manifest an element, maybe you get a material that represents both of them together, which can then be the building block for a unique category of substances. If elements by definition are meant to be combined into structures like molecules to make every other material, then fusion elements, the Kekkei Genkai, are still their own elements for specific types of materials that can't be made out of the properties of the normal ones. Each Kekkei Genkai would then have to fit 3 criteria, narrowing down what we need to look for. It would have to be a type of substance that has the broader strengths of its parent elements, but also it would have to have a trait that is exclusive to a specific category of materials, and that trait would have to embody both of the concepts behind its parent elements. Despite making a solid, Haku's ice style has the speed and sharp projectile affinity of wind style and the fluid shape control and blending capability of water style. The trait of freezing pulls away something's heat using the motion control of wind style and changes its state of matter using the flexibility of water style. Wood style has the strength and permanence of earth style and the shape control and variety of water style. And as said before, growth is a combination of water style's flexibility and earth style's stability. So what are all 10 Kekkei Genkai chakra natures? There are 13 candidates in Naruto itself, and they could even be materials we haven't even considered, but no matter what they are, I do think there are only supposed to be 10. If the idea is that these are the elements behind visible materials, then simple combinations of elements would be like molecules. Oxygen gas is 2 oxygen atoms put together, and ozone is 3. Oxygen and ozone are 2 different molecules, but they're both made from different combinations of the same element. So I don't think we can make something like 2 parts fire, 1 part water for a unique element, or 1 part water, 1 part ice, because the elements are formed by overlapping all of the relevant traits before they manifest through your chakra. A change in chakra nature would be like oxygen gas, a compound made purely from one element, but not the raw atom itself. Ice wouldn't be a combination of water and air. It would be a combination of the building blocks behind water and air as atoms. And since the number of those concepts stay the same, there are 5 basic traits that manifest 5 different elements. They have a total of 31 combinations, 5 on their own, 10 pairs, 10 trios, 5 quartets, and then all of them together in the goop stuff Obito summons. This puts the number of pure Kekkei Genkai elements at 10. The core story names 8 of them: magnet, boil, explosion, lava, wood, scorch, ice, and storm, but it doesn't provide all of their positions, and it doesn't say what the last 2 should be. Naruto's extended media, across the games, movies, novels, and filler, introduce 5 other Kekkei Genkai that they present as pure elements. I don't think this is inherently a plot hole, because it's story relevant that a lot of characters misidentify things and misinterpret the power system. But there are situations where conflicting details are given out of story to the audience. So there are cases where different pieces of media do contradict each other. So if I had to give weights to the different types of sources of Naruto lore, the primary source would be the manga itself, as the most reliable. although it can be deliberately misleading and is always subject to change if the authors want it to, so I wouldn't fully trust any manga statements at face value. The second best type of source would be official spin-offs, like the light novels, where you can assume the overall contents are canon, but because there's a chance of miscommunication between authors, it's possible some inaccuracies slipped in. The third best type of source would be sensational spin-offs, official media like movies and games, but that don't necessarily have canon stories. Depending on what they care about, they could be made with access to behind-the-scenes world-building notes from the official story, but because we wouldn't know, it's safer to treat their lore additions as claims that we could evaluate against the official stuff ourselves. And the last type would be anime filler, because since the anime is an adaptation of the original story, filler deviates from both the source material and the point of the media. Filler can be good in theory, and it can incorporate behind-the-scenes rules about the power system, but because of the purpose behind it, it's much less likely. So across these 4 types of media, the best element candidate is steel release from the novels. It's in an official story, it functions like a raw change in chakra nature, and it's a material completely different from the base elements. Not to mention, it would fit the pattern of the leftover Taoist elements reappearing as Kekkei Genkai, like wood style. As a material, it has the concentrated force and intensity of lightning release, and the firmness and might of earth. And as a metal, it would be good at directing pressure, a trait which also combines the concepts behind those elements. The most famous candidate would probably be crystal release from that filler arc in Shippuden. As a material, it's unique compared to the elements we know, but on a deeper level, it doesn't really mesh with any of the base concepts. The crystals grow between things and then shatter. Their specialty is the precision through which they grow, because they can be very sharp or encase a target without them realizing. So on the surface, the Kekkei Genkai takes after wind release and earth release, making mighty crystals with the freedom to grow further or break apart. But they also have a lot of natural flexibility for what you can make with them, like a water nature, and the user always summons them from nothing and has them spread across wide distances, like a fire nature. There aren't 2 elements it can be attributed to without it also fitting another element just as well. And it's more mystical than the other materially grounded fusion elements. It's also worth considering how faithful that filler arc was trying to be to the core ideas of the source material, which was not at all. The premise for this filler was to keep weekly viewers invested long enough to get back to the actual story, by making it look indistinguishable from canon Naruto, at the cost of the story itself missing some of the consistency, which meant injecting a dramatic storyline, cameoing major villains like Kabuto to tease the idea of the wider plot going somewhere, and pretending that Naruto would get a major power-up by the end of the arc that he could use for the rest of the series. The whole arc was centered around Naruto learning some game-changing chakra fusion technique, so viewers would think the whole expedition would be relevant, and the punchline at the end was that it was a joke. The only priority of this filler was clickbait, over making it a quality product. Not to say that crystal release can't exist, it just fits better as something other than a Kekkei Genkai element. Not every Kekkei Genkai needs to be a raw fusion element, and not every fusion element has to be a Kekkei Genkai. Maybe yin and yang are mixed in, or maybe it's a combination of 3 or more elements. But I don't think crystal release was made with a fine attention to the underlying details of Naruto's world. Because if it were, then whoever made it could have just written a satisfying standalone arc that didn't have to waste as much time trying to pass itself off as the official story with drawn-out plot lines that ultimately went nowhere. Our third candidate is swift release from the movie, because it's treated as an element, but the user never summons a substance. They augment their speed to move quicker and almost seem to jump around. It could just be a case of some kind of technique using a similar naming scheme as a chakra nature. It doesn't seem tied to a material at all, but it's that much stranger that it was included as a concept in the movie. And if it is supposed to be a non-canon chakra nature, it's strange that they didn't even try to name it after some kind of vaguely speed-related substance. It's called Swift and barely relevant. And then, it was worth bringing back for the video game adaptation of that movie, although that was also the same game that listed the Amaterasu as a chakra nature, so I don't think the game team were prioritizing power system accuracy. Which leads to Blaze release, the Amaterasu's black flames, which were said in that video game to be one of the 10 Kekkei Genkai chakra natures. It can be replicated through fire augmented with yin and yang for supernatural effects, like the Two Tails. So unless Boruto wants to go somewhere with it, it doesn't seem like it would be a raw unique element. And that leaves us with our last candidate, Mud Release. This one's also from the novels, but the idea is that combining water and earth can give some people mud instead of wood. At face value, this could be evidence that there are more than 10 raw fusion elements, and Yamato did specifically describe his process for using wood release as combining earth chakra from his right hand with water from his left. But Kekkei Genkai users can use their change in chakra nature with a single hand, and what Yamato was saying seemed more like an explanation of the mixing process for two changes in chakra nature. It's a struggle for anyone to use chakra, and if you aren't born with the skill, you have to consciously strain to apply a change in chakra nature. So if a change in chakra nature is like tapping into the trait behind an element, and that already takes some concentration, it would be tough to learn to apply two changes in chakra nature at the same time. Because not only do you have to overlap them, you have to overlap them so precisely that it changes what compound manifests in the first place. It's the difference between swapping houses around in Lego City and swapping the blocks they're made of to shape them into things that aren't even houses. Not only do you need the talent to naturally apply two separate changes in chakra nature, you need to be able to overlap them at such a level that even at the smallest level, they manifest as something different. You're not settling for naturally generating swirls of oxygen gas and hydrogen gas. You're naturally being able to generate water, H2O. You gotta form the elements so they bond together instead of to themselves. Kekkei Genkai users can naturally perform their Kekkei Genkai's change in chakra nature, which means if they break it down, they can also perform its parent changes in chakra nature. And they're so natural with this, they can improvise their own jutsu or manipulate their element like a muscle. Mud Release seems like the case of someone who has a bloodline trait, allowing them to use both water style and earth style reflexively, but can't fuse them, leaving them with the tendency to make a physical mixture of water and earth, but not a new type of material with its own new trait. But leaving those candidates alone for now, let's try to fill the chart with the elements that are claimed to exist in the official story. First is Scorch Release. It's an absorbent that makes things dry. It spreads its destructive effect, so fire, and the effect works by extracting moisture, so wind. The main substance is a stabler ball of heat that glides around, so it fits the strengths of fire release and wind release too. Next is Explosion or Blast Release. It's an explosive, so because of the concentrated force, extremeness, and jumping, it's at least gotta be from lightning. There's also a scene in Datara's fight with Sasuke, where Sasuke is able to burn out the clay dolls Datara puts his blast release chakra into, by overwhelming them with lightning release because they're made from a forbidden technique that lets you animate clay, so earth release, which is weak to lightning, to use as fuel for blast release. So even though Datara's using a Kekkei Genkai, the clay he relies on for larger attacks to separate him from a melee fighter like Gari is still vulnerable to lightning because lightning has advantage over earth. But because Datara's putting his chakra in a type of earth to detonate it, like how Sasuke overwhelms patches of earth by injecting his lightning release, blast most likely comes from lightning. Then explosions disperse destructive force outward and can set off other explosives, so the other element that fits would be fire. It's not stable unless you put it in something, so not earth, and definitely not flexible, so not water. But if it were more about shockwaves and knockback than damage and impact, it could have fit for wind. Boil Release disperses to fill an area, and then slowly dissolves things. This is the Kekkei Genkai for control over acidity, a slider that lets you toggle a destructive infection that changes the composition of what it touches. And its material is a hot state of matter of water, so water plus fire. And Lava Release makes a stretchy liquid state of matter for Earth that's incredibly hot, so Earth plus fire. Also, stretchiness as a concept is spreading plus stability. Magnet Release is what it sounds. Similar to the Earth Release jutsu that can make things heavier or lighter, I'm imagining you can partly summon and manifest the characteristics of an element through your chakra to apply to things directly, rather than having to create that full substance. which would explain how magnet release can use magnetism without having to make a physical magnet, although magnets as a substance do exist, similar to blast release. But I'd imagine in both cases you still could. Either way, magnets consistently affect the attraction and repulsion of things, so earth plus wind. And the last known element is storm, which manifests as a fluid plasma you can group together, freely control, and fire as beams. It's tangible lightning if you had flexible control over it, so lightning plus water. But what would its trait be? Plasma can build up and release a charge, which would fit the concentration, connectivity, and extreme jumping of lightning, and the flexibility, maintenance, and balance of water. So, if being an energy container is the trait, it would explain how the Cloud Village end up advancing their laser tech to the point they have a Death Star by Naruto the Last. But it would also explain why the Kekkei Genkai is called Storm Release, because it would embody building up a charge like a storm cloud. And again, with Chakra, you can replicate an element to varying degrees, manifesting just some of its properties, or alternatively, augmenting it with additional complications. So a storm release-based jutsu that bothers to summon actual storm clouds is totally within scope, and would be natural for someone with a natural ability to wield all three natures of storm release, lightning release, and water release, which would explain how the Kekkei Genkai collector's storm jutsu in that movie made actual storm clouds instead of the direct plasma we're used to. But this leaves two spots in the chart, lightning and earth, and lightning and wind. So because the position is still free, I would put the officially recognized steel release for lightning and earth, which means we only have to fill in lightning and wind. And if magnet release is able to apply magnetism without summoning a physical magnet first, the lightning and wind Kekkei Genkai should be able to apply its trait without having to summon its material. And since more modern concepts, like plasma, can be substances, a scientifically recognized type of matter that exists across the Earth can still be an element even if it's hard to notice. After all, air is invisible and hard to touch, and it still counts. But as a base element, it's everywhere and known by every civilization since the dawn of time because it's necessary for breathing. So ancient shinobi might have only been able to recognize the trait of an unknown invisible substance, and name its Kekkei Genkai after that effect. The material type itself would need to have the strengths of lightning and wind, and its trait should embody the concepts of extreme jumping and free motion behind them. So if this Kekkei Genkai is based on elementary particles, like neutrinos, which move at near light speed and phase through things like the Earth on a constant basis, and its matching trait would be something like propulsion or quickly applying speeds, then swift release would line up perfectly as the last element. I do think there is a good chance that the movie specifically about Kekkei Genkai was given some kind of knowledge about storm release and the unnamed elements, so they would know how they could present them differently from how people are used to them. But in total, that would bring us to ice, which kind of beats scorch, which kind of beats blast, which kind of beats swift, which kind of beats magnet, which kind of beats steel, which kind of beats storm, which kind of beats wood, which kind of beats lava, which kind of beats boil. I think the chart works, which could be cool for tabletop games or something. I don't think Boruto's gonna do anything with this, so that's the best I've got until something else comes out about the chakra natures. The formula changes a bit though when 3 elements are involved. It's no longer applying a trait of a category of physical substances to things. It's something else. So that chart can be its own thing at some point. But either way, that's all.